Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us a few extra minutes. We forget that sometimes when there's principals' coffees, the parking gets a little tricky. So thank you for finding a spot. My name is Kim Lappel. I'm the principal at HCC Crittenden. I'm here today with some wonderful people. We have Mrs. Pellegrino, who is our math chairperson, Mrs. Kay, who is our science department chair. Mr. Ancona is here. He's our assistant principal. I also thought I saw, Petre Verma, he is here. He's a Board of Education member. Thank you for being here. And also Mr. Scott Levy, he's here as well. So thank you everyone for being here today. A few announcements before we get to our information about the math and science programs. Besides thanking the Board of Ed, who are always such a support at the middle school, I wanted to also, Mr. Ancona and I wanted to identify both the Education Foundation and the PTSA. There's some really pivotal things that have been done over the past couple of years, but I want to just talk about a couple things this year that have enriched the kids' lives at HCC. The Education Foundation, two things that I thought would be important to highlight. Our sixth graders in November and December, they were able to participate in something called Half the Story, and it was a program the Education Foundation brought in where our tech department worked with our sixth graders, so every sixth grader got to experience it, and Half the Story is about social media and its impact on our children, and it was having them reflect on who they are and how they see themselves and how technology and social media and just different sites affect them. So it was a reflective component where they looked at some real, how they live their lives and how it's impacted by social media and how are some healthy approaches towards that. So that was a mini grant or a grant that the Education Foundation supported us. We're hoping to have Half the Story come and speak to parents the week of April 8th in the evening, remotely. But that date hasn't been set. We're still trying to negotiate a time that works for everyone. If it's not that week, it might be later in April, so more information to come. I also want to thank the Education Foundation for developing two spots in our school called the Chill Spots. There's the Big Chill and the Little Chill. They are areas in our school that were being utilized but underutilized, and so Mr. Ancona and I asked the Education Foundation if they would help us transform them into settings where students could have opportunities to socialize together and play and hang out, and that shows up with, we do have some opportunities like the Switch where they all will play together, nothing's connected to the outside world, against one another, and you see them interacting. They did the dance party, I always forget the name of that, where
It was a dance party.
it was a dance party
So
that,
if you've ever seen 8 boys doing these dance moves, I mean, it was the first time I've ever seen it.
so yeah, on the screen you have to follow what this other one leader of this dance party is doing, and they're all doing these dances, and they were having so much fun, and our whole point was trying to get different groups to socialize with one another and go beyond their comfort zone in terms of their groups of friends, and it's been happening. So we also have a smaller chill space, it's called the Little Chill, that we also utilize, and again, it's just an opportunity to have our kids be together, and at times we even have an opportunity for 7th and 8th grade students to be together during that time. Something we thought of and we know is true is that in middle school, you are limited in your social groups during the day to your grade. And that's just age appropriate. Elementary, it goes by class. In the middle school, it's more grade level. And it can be limiting sometimes when it's fun to do things by interest. Scott and I were just talking about that. When you hit high school, that's where you really, it's 9-12, and you can find your friends in all different groups, but it's based on interest. So this is an opportunity where, because of these renovated rooms, we're trying to provide even 7th and 8th graders some time together, again, for natural connections. So it's been very exciting, and we have a fish tank in there that we're all enthralled with. We even, we'll visit it, and you just get caught up watching the fish, and that's what our kids also are doing. So it's just a great environment. As far as the PTSA is concerned, they've brought such life to the HCC. They are responsible for our kindness speaker. We also, which made such a huge impact this year. Also help us to bring in a speaker earlier in the year for the Power of One, and then they also support the Brain Challenge, and that will take place next week, and it's on a Friday right before a break. And we bring both teams on each grade. So 7th grade, 7A and 7B, go into the auditorium. And on the stage is this whole gig that is set up, and they have this
Trivia.
it's trivia, but what would you, the person who's coordinating it all has this huge personality, and he gets 7A against 7B, or the A's against the B's, and they dress in different colors, and there's such energy and life to it. So again, that's thanks to the PTSA, and the kids leave so energized just for a fun day before break. It's only an hour, so don't think that we have them in there all day. And there is learning that's taking place later in the day, but that's just a really fun component for our kids as well. So thank you to all of the organizations and the people that make such a difference in our kids' lives. Reminder that Boston and DC, if you have a 7th or 8th grader, there are trips coming up. May 8th through 10th is the DC trip. May 30 and 31st is the Boston trip. We had all of our parent meetings, the forms have been out, the deposits are requested. If I can be of any assistance, let me know. And also, if you can be a chaperone, let us know. Okay, Mr. Ancona and I both go on these trips. We went last year. It is a game changer. We hadn't had them because of COVID for 4 years? Or 3 years? I thought it was 4 years. So last year was the first year in 4 years, and we had almost forgotten how great they are. They're just such community builders and opportunities for our children to have these memories that they build together. Speaking of building memories, our state assessments are in April, so just know that they're coming. For math and ELA, they're all going to be computer-based. Which, do you want to say anything about the computer-based?
They're computer-based, yes. Last year, we had our 7th graders take them on CBT, and we found that it was very effective. Kids like to take the ELA especially, that they can cut and paste evidence from the text right into their answers. So when we surveyed our 7th graders, what they found most interesting or different, they said they like to be able to use the word processor instead of writing. They like the cut and paste feature, and they found that it was easier to read on a computer than paper, than having to go back and forth on paper, since everything was, like, the questions were right next to the text that they had to answer. And for math also, they said things like the editor was easy to use. They're used to using the math editor for all of their other assignments that they use, so they found that it was easier to use than the paper.
Our students are well practiced. They know technology so much better than we do. So this isn't something that all of a sudden we're having them take a test on a computer. They're well prepared, well practiced, and ready for it. I am going to take a moment just to say how well ready they are for it. Last year, all of our scores were in the top 3% out of 600 schools, and I would highlight that our 8th grade math was #1 in the state. Our 7th grade math was #2 in the state. Our ELA 8th grade was #2 in the state. Like, those numbers are we're very proud, because I also want to say we don't teach to the test. What we do is we teach our students skills and thinking and habits that make a difference so that they can tackle, this is the floor for them. So although we prepare them, we make sure they're familiar with the format. The way we teach is completely constructivist in math, where they make meaning and they develop those understandings with the support of the teachers. It's all experiential, and it really challenges them to think critically, and it elevates the rigor for each and every one of our kids, and it's shown. Sure?
Do they get to take a mock test on computer before they go for the final?
Mock tests, how they?
Yes, so that they're practice platforms. Actually, the state has a practice platform that students can use, and teachers go through that practice platform before they take the test.
Miss Simon saying, especially for maths, children do better on paper than on computer. Like ELA, yes, it doesn't really make any difference, but math, her observation was the group does always better on paper than.
Who is that?
Miss Simon.
Okay. Our math was 2 and 1 last year. So absolutely, we're aware of it. Even if we wanted to stay paper, the reality is we're not going to be able to. The state's moving us over to it. But with all of our, so you can tell that Mr. Ancona has spoken to the kids. We've surveyed the teachers. We've made a very thoughtful plan with our department chairs to make sure that all the things that they are able to do on paper in terms of their thinking and their processing, they can do also on their computer-based piece. But yes, I'm still a paper person. So
our teachers, so students do get to use scrap paper, even with the CBT. So our teachers make it a point to make sure that they show their work
Yes.
before they enter their answers.
So we've been promoting all those
Yeah.
habits, but point taken. Okay, and then speaking of phenomenal programs, as I said, Lisa and Deborah here to speak to you about the math program and pathways for the connection between HCC and the high school. So,
Did you use that
One
word on
slide at the
purpose?
start.
and everyone knows that's our essential question that drives our work at the middle school. I think I'm going to tattoo it on my arm one day. Okay, it's up to you.
Thank you. So I'll apologize ahead of time. It's good that everyone's socially distanced because I'm going to sniffle a lot. I did get, tested. It's not anything serious. Apparently, I'm just a giant baby, and I have a cold that won't go away. So I'm here to talk to you about our math pathways, both at HCC and then what you can expect at the high school as well. So we just have some students there working on what we call rich tasks. So you will hear that throughout middle school and high school. It really grounds our work. A rich task is something that we say has a low floor and a high ceiling. So it's the same math task that can be given to an entire class, and the mathematics can be accessed at different levels. The other benefit of a rich task is it leaves something that we call mathematics residue, which kind of gives you a little bit of a feeling of what that is. So the mathematics stays beyond that particular problem and gets called back throughout the year. So our pathway for acceleration has kind of two split points. The first one occurs mid to end of 7th grade through conferencing with the teachers, and then the other occurs mid through end of 9th grade. So the first pathway that we have that comes off of 7th grade is based off of tiered assignments that are given to the students throughout the year, more focused in quarters 2, 3, and 4, that are actually kind of counting towards that pathway. We give the first quarter as an adjustment period for students. From there, students will go on to our A pathway, which is an advanced pathway but also accelerated. So the level of rigor in that course is high, not just because the course is happening a year earlier, but also because of the depth of the content and also breadth. I always describe the A pathway as a broken clock, that you kind of change time every, let's say, 58, 59 minutes as opposed to 60 minutes. And the reason for that is when you get to that 11th grade time frame, we have to be able to have half of that year reserved just for teaching calculus, because the BC course is such a rich course that to start it from scratch senior year just isn't possible. So what you'll see in a lot of other schools, they might do a BC class over 2 years. They might co-seat kids, in 2 different math classes. This is our approach, and I do think it's worked, really well. We've had BC and been successful with it for longer than I've been at Byram Hills, and I think we have a strong program there. The second pathway occurs in 9th grade. The most often heard by me misconception is that if my student did not get selected in 7th grade, that they can't take calculus or that they can't take AP calculus. It's not true. It's not true. I promise you this slide is true. So if you're coming off of that second pathway, that enables a student to take either what we call a Calc 12, which is a non-AP, or AP Calc AB. Okay, the only distinction there is the BC. The difference between the two being that BC Calculus is 2 semesters of college calculus, whereas AP Calc AB is 1 semester of college calculus. I can tell you, having taught both courses for a long time, having taught seniors, I think since I started teaching, that course is only a deal breaker in like the most remotest of situations, having or not having the BC. I've had numerous students go on to and be very successful in various engineering programs, and they have come out with an AP Calc AB as opposed to BC. So those are our 2 pathways. Again, the first one in 7th grade, and then the second one in 9th grade. And those are our 2 kind of endpoints. If a student does not go through either of those 2 extension pathways, our kind of, what you would consider a run-of-the-mill coursework would go through Algebra 1 in 9th grade, Geometry in 10th grade, Algebra 2 Trig in 11th grade, and then a general pre-calc in 12th grade. So what informs the curriculum that we do? So if you notice how I said like the A pathway is a broken clock, and even if you're going into that second pathway for acceleration, there's a lot of condensing of material that needs to happen. So mathematics is different than, let's say, some of the humanities where you're teaching more broader skills. Mathematics is really specific content that students need to master. So what we've done is really carefully looked at that content and said, which is absolutely necessary for a couple of things. To make our students ready for my colleague Deb Kay at her department in science, to make sure that they're ready for that study of calculus in 12th grade, and then also for the SAT and ACT. Now, if you notice, we had kind of a dip with the SAT and ACT in terms of requirements in the past couple of years. But if you've been following the news, it's starting to swing back the other way, right? So we had, I think Dartmouth was the first of the Ivies, and then Yale, and I would guess, though Ms. Wilson was a better judge of that than I, but if I had to guess, I would say you'll start to see other colleges follow suit with that, yeah.
One question. So I recently heard that the SAT, the math section has changed in format and that it gets harder.
Correct.
So that I'm just curious.
It's
like
adaptive.
It's adaptive. So just curious, like if your department has planned to address that as
We've already talking about it.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So actually, one of the teachers in the department, his professional plan this year is around just that, and has been studying that fairly extensively. So just so everyone's on the page in terms of what we're talking about. So you see this kind of general trend both with the 3-8 testing as well as the upper level testing of a shift towards computer-based. And now it's an adaptive computer-based at that SAT level. So what's going to happen is, based off of how your student answers those questions, the path is going to change for them in the context of that particular test. So sitting down, we might take two somewhat different SAT tests. So we are absolutely aware of that. We are already starting to study that. What you would likely see from that is an adjustment, not just of topics though, but of like the level of difficulty. So they'll adjust and say, okay, we gave you something that was at this level, like based off of that, they could tell, okay, that's either content you completely don't know, or the way multiple choice usually works is like there's one or two answers that are there if they know you're going to make a certain mistake, right? So they're not kind of like one right answer and four random, wrong answers. The other ones are there, knowing if you made this mistake, you'll be here, you'll be here, you'll be here. So based off of that, it'll kind of put you different places. Yes?
So I attended an SAT information session a few days ago, and my understanding based on that session was that there's a module everyone takes initially, and at the end of that module, that's where there's two different tests that come after.
Right, so you'll be kind of, I'm not going to say I'm an expert on this, but my understanding is you might be capped based off of that initial module in terms of what your range of scores could be. Right. I would anticipate for the high school, again, I don't want to speak out of my department for guidance, I would anticipate you'll see some more things coming out just about the testing in general, but that's definitely one of our platforms of study this year. I've not seen so far any adjustments in terms of the topics. And the SAT, what's interesting for, not to go off on a complete tangent, but the SAT versus the ACT tends to be a little bit more content-based, whereas the SAT, in terms of the scope of the content, is not as broad, like in terms of specific skills you would need, so it doesn't go as far into let's say a pre-calculus, but the range of abilities they can test within the scope that they have there is broader, right? So that's why I say you might get another problem that's along the same content, but just modified to be within your kind of zone of readiness. So this is our first pathway criteria. The 7th grade teachers are already up and running with this for our current 7th graders. They've started meeting with students. I believe last Friday they also had some emails go out just to make sure students and families are in the loop and they're aware of what is happening during the year. So what we're really looking for, and I think Deb will probably echo this with science as well, is what we're looking for is a skills readiness. It doesn't mean that one student is, quote unquote smarter than another. It just means that in that moment, based off of what we're seeing and your performance on these particular skills, both specific content skills as well as your ability to adapt to non-routine problems. One thing that really separates the advanced pathway from any of the pathways outside of it is our expectation that you will be able to work in ambiguity. That you'll be able to be kind of given a couple of skills, but then take those skills, put them together, and move forward on a problem that you haven't been able to see. So some students are quite successful in mathematics, but they are more comfortable with problems that they have seen and they have dealt with and they know what to do. So then the first pathway might not be the right one for you, right? Because then the second pathway, where you would be expected to be kind of in that more zone of development for yourself, might be the better pathway. So that's kind of how we approach it. So we'll look at the extension questions, which again are kind of your out-of-the-box non-routine problems. We'll take a look at how students are doing within the class on tests and quizzes. You see those standards feedback that are also in the portal, and then kind of general habits of mind towards skills. And then what we do is it's not necessarily like a line in the sand, but rather it's to create a spectrum, right? In a similar way that maybe college approaches. It's not like a yes or a no pile. They're just using criteria to kind of to fan out the applicants, and then we take a look and say, okay, this, these we're probably pretty certain about. These, we might need to have some conversations about. One of the things that we see with this approach in the classroom, and I do think, just having had a lot of teachers come here from other districts, whether for employment or otherwise, I think our department does an excellent job at teaching those non-routine problems, which is why I think we have had a lot of success both on standardized testing, on SAT and ACT, and otherwise. We routinely have students come back from college saying they felt so well prepared. Because they are getting those multiple approaches. So it's not just about one way to a problem, but recognizing there's different ways, and that a particular approach might have value in this moment, but a different approach might have value 2 or 3 years down the line. And I think that's where, for anyone that was like a anti-Common Core person, I think the Common Core actually had really good intent, in that if you looked at the way the skills were developed, a lot of things were taught that you could yield a lot of benefits later on down the line from how they were taught, but I just don't know that that messaging got across. Perhaps the Common Core did not have the right marketing folks. They could, collaborate with the pets.com folks who had great marketing. If anybody knows that, thank you. I appreciate that. Great marketing, but just the wrong time to market. But I do think there was a lot of good intentions there. It just didn't play out the way, they wanted it to. Seeing a lot of flexibility with students. Ability to kind of self-assess and choose the path for them, both overarching and also in that moment, so from a macro and micro level. And then what we're able to do is then provide students who are ready with mathematics that's beyond their grade level. Yes?
You want to go?
No.
Okay. Correlating like how well we're doing with the math assessments and the state tests, and it seems like we're doing trending really well. Have you seen any trends where you're seeing more kids accelerate over time in 8th grade? Or
So we have seen a larger percentage of the population that is accelerating and accessing higher levels of mathematics, and we're also seeing an increase in the grades of those students. So
Over time,
correct. Like over
But is
their
there a
time.
capacity that we're keeping in 8th grade, like 2 sections, 1 per team, or are
No,
we able to
so
expand
the reality,
it?
I don't mind answering that. The reality is that there are 2 sections, 1 in each team. It works well, but we would never gatekeep or keep the sections only at 2 if there was more of a need. It's important that it's never about like, oh, we can only have 40 children, so that's during 7th grade, the teachers really take this time to learn about to push kids, to encourage them, to see who's going to take those tasks, those rich tasks, and have those conversations with students. And some students take them, and it works great. We know that that data shows us that they're going to do well, because it's a real big push in 8th grade for the algebra class, a huge push. And I'm not being dramatic. It's so. Are they ready, both academically, mathematically, but are they also ready as a learner to possibly work really hard and earn grades? It's great when you earn the A's, but what happens if you earn the C's or the B's? And what happens if you're struggling and other people aren't? Where do you, because middle school's middle school. They're going to talk about their grades, they're going to compare their grades. So that doesn't factor in like we would hold a student back, but we'd be having conversations with a student if we saw that they struggled, or they did well at a rich task, but they really struggled when they earned a B in that, say. We'd then have those conversations. If it was warranted that we should go above those 2 classes, we would. It hasn't yet. It's always been around a certain level in terms of percentage. About 20% of the kids that out of 7th grade seem prepared. It fluctuates. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. And there's an important point to make in all of this, and that is, I think we all know that sometimes 7th graders grow up and they're ready and they want to be more of a student in 8th grade, and some can and some still have work to do, but we want to give them that opportunity. So in 8th grade, for the first month, we don't put a sign up and say, hey, do extra work and you can maybe be switched, but we give ourselves that buffer to observe our students and have conversations and see how they do. In that first month, the curriculums are parallel, so if we had to make any switches, we would. And ideally, in middle school, I think we'd rather switch them up than switch them out, because it hurts when you have to say, I thought you could and it isn't working, and do you want this negative, what you see as a negative grade on your transcript, because it is a high school transcript, versus giving them that support, wanting them to be able to do it. And if they do it, and they show that they're interested, because their initiative is a huge piece as well, then those conversations will be had, and we'll ask them, we'll say, we think this is going to be a huge lift, but do you want to have that opportunity? So we still even have the first month of school that we take time to do it. I know that was more than you asked,
No, but you have capacity if there was another
Absolutely.
section needed, or you wouldn't
Yep.
have 40 kids in one class.
we always kind of go in knowing that we have this flexibility if we had to. Yes, for sure.
I was just wondering if there's a reason why the kids don't get to take their quizzes and tests home with them. As I was just very curious about the extension questions, and my daughter's never really been able to show me the extension questions, because she says the tests are given out, they look at them, and they take them back immediately, and that's
So
it.
I will say, I have a similar policy for some of my questions for BC Calculus. Some of those questions, there's only so many ways you can ask an extension on a particular content, right? And it takes a long time to craft those questions. There might be only so much flexibility within how you're going to assess it. And we, from experience, know once it's out there, then it becomes a question of like, did some students have access to this from brothers and sisters or tutors? Sometimes I'll be honest, I've had tutors that save tests from teachers from year to year. And so really we do it just out of fairness for all students and to make it equitable, so that it's not a situation of like someone had access to something.
And to make
someone
sure we're really
didn't,
assessing
you know.
that higher level
Yeah.
of, can they make that leap and make sometimes a connection between what they learned in class and how they applied it to a much more challenging task. If those questions are out, it takes away that opportunity that we can assess whether our students can make that big leap in 8th grade or not. It's never a gotcha, but I know it must be frustrating. I'd be like, well, can't we see it so I can go over what mistakes are made? I will say, if any parent ever wants to come in and see something, we could do that, and we can even consider like trying to share some models. It impacts the authenticity of us trying to make sure we're assessing where students are placed fairly and accurately. We don't want to ever misplace a student. It's painful.
In reference to the extension question, so I know, as you mentioned, that, kids want to make sure that their averages are high. Like,
Yep.
It's a big stress for them, and we're seeing that a lot now. In terms of the extension questions, like, for example, like my son will want to really make sure that the content of his exam is intact just because he doesn't want his
Right.
average to fall.
Right.
But then sometimes doesn't have enough time to finish the extension questions, even though like he'll look at them to see like
Yep.
if he can answer, and he knows he just needs the time, but he's still more focused on making sure his grade is gonna be solid for the exam. Are there any opportunities, and sometimes we'll ask about his exam and ask him what the content was of the extension questions that he wasn't able to answer, and he's able to kind of just say like, this was on it and I tried to do this, but then like we'll try to talk it through with him, but if we
Right.
know we can't really see the question.
Right.
But would there be any opportunities, like especially now going into 8th grade, if the students don't have time to take the extension questions, like can they go, like is there like an opportunity to do like at a dip time in a closed session for them to just work on the extension questions and have like a math teacher like just review it with them just to see if they can do it, like just to see if there's an opportunity to, like if they had time to look at it and can get through the problems, even if they end up being wrong, but can try to.
So I don't know, Lisa, you look at me like you wouldn't mind me answering this, and you guys are all turning, so let me, so I think every teacher knows that this
Right.
exists, so there's a trust that they've earned, like it exists, that they want to make sure that they're giving each student an opportunity to work through challenging questions. So then I think I would ask, it's your son, right?
Yeah.
I would ask him to maybe go seek the teacher out and say, here's how I'm feeling. This is really hard. I'm worried about a mistake. I think I can do it, and they will let him work through it. Part of it is that they're like the automaticity of being able to do certain parts of it versus understanding the conceptual component, working through mistakes. All of that can tell us whether next year is the right time or another year is the right time. So it's not, there's not a perfect science, except that we know that we want to be there and support our kids. So I'd say have them go talk to whoever's math teacher has had that conversation. I don't think we can just allow more and more time, because to give an because there needs to be a sense of again, of the automaticity, the understanding of the concepts, but to help a student work through something so that they're developing their mathematical understandings. We'll never say no to that. So.
I
Okay.
would just echo the point about the fluency. That is something that is paramount, especially for that advanced pathway. It's a good question for your son to ask, like, are there areas that I could be more fluent in, right? It's just like a language. If you're speaking with someone, like, could you use Google Translate? For sure. Is there going to be a lot of latency in there? For sure. Is it going to misunderstand things? For sure. So the more fluent you are with a particular skill, it'll pay dividends other places. Like my students will always ask me, do I have to do it this way or this way? You do it whatever way you want. I said, I'm not going to punish you for doing it that way, but time will punish you. Because that way is fraught with error. It's going to take you a long time, right? It's the same thing as if I said I'm going to go to the Westchester, but first I'm going to drive to Buffalo and then I'm going to come back and go there, right? Could I get there? Absolutely could. Am I still getting to the Westchester? Yes. But I'm getting there in longer time, and there's a much greater likelihood that something's going to go wrong. The car is going to break down, I'm going to run out of gas, whatever it is. So the longer that path, it's just fraught with areas that it could go wrong. Now when you're in an Algebra 1 class, you might only have that one question as your entirety of your test, right? But what happens year after year is the question that once was one whole question becomes this part, this part, this part, and then this part of a question that's this long. So if the fluency doesn't happen, you're kind of stuck, right? Because you're there saying, well, I didn't have time, because that part ate up so much of it and you were never able to get here. So that's why we are a big push. I don't ever want to say like if you're good at math, you're fast, and if you're fast at math, you're good, because I don't believe that those are complete tautologies. I would just say there does need to be a fluency, especially at that A level, in order to just be able to kind of keep going with the curriculum.
If I could just also add, even though I haven't had my time on the floor yet, there is a lot of parallels here, because I think, science is a phenomenon that we kind of focus on a series of steps to solve a problem. I mean, to answer a question, actually. Problem would be engineering. But so what I'm hearing you say is that in some cases we don't know, and the question is the student not getting to the whether it's the challenging questions or finishing an assessment, because they either are going to Buffalo before they get to the Westchester, or is it because accelerated students or students that are high achievers also have a tendency to fester and fixate because they want so badly to do well, and that is something that is data we have to accumulate to try to answer our question and analyze to figure out really what is happening here. So once we have some more information and we can dissect that it's not the trip to Buffalo, it's really the festering, that is another skill development that we have to help these students work through so that they can be more efficient and more confident in their abilities. So, that's another thing to consider.
Why don't we use this as an opportunity to shift over to science, if that's okay with everyone?
Okay.
Okay.
And there will
I'm
be
still
more
here,
time,
Mom.
there'll be more time at the end to answer questions. And quite frankly, so much of this is overlapping and interconnected, so feel free at any point just to,
Thank you.
ask questions, yeah.
Great,
So,
hand the power to you.
thank you. So, if anybody, Wonder Twins, am I dating myself? Activate form of, did anyone watch that?
Yeah, activate.
I used to love it. So, thank you, I'm Deb Kay. It's nice to see everybody here to learn more about our science program. I will echo what Ms. Label said earlier. It's great to see our trustees on our Board of Education here. I've been in Byram for 15 years and I do not live here, but having a frame of reference, which is another real important kind of thing in science, is to compare. I will say that this is a truly special place, and we are all extremely fortunate to be here in so many ways, be it the PTSA or the Ed Foundation, but really the trustees who volunteer their time on the Board of Education. I have a special place in my heart for them. So it is a really amazing place. I was talking to a colleague, and it's almost like the closest thing you're going to get in the public sector to private, people really do such a good job here. So anyway, if you heard Ms. Lappel refer to the science and math department, she said the word phenomenal, and I think that's a great segue into the conversation for science, because what we were just discussing about students and the way that they learn or approach things, that's a phenomenon that we can always get more data about to help us answer these questions and, do a better job in our continuous improvement model. But in science, we're going through a shift in our process and the way that we deliver science instruction, because the state ed department has launched new standards. They were adopted back in 2016, and we have been going through the implementation process for quite some time now. Even though we had the pandemic, we still didn't stop learning and thinking about how we can make these conceptual shifts in Byram Hills. The good part is that, in my biased opinion, but I really think it's based on reality, our teachers in our department are very, very inquiry-based deliverers of instruction or facilitators of learning. And for that reason, it's not going to be such a huge shift for us. But the shift is being done because, just like the Common Core in math and ELA, across the country and world, people want to try to pay closer attention that all students receive an equal opportunity education. And for that reason, that's why these standards have been developed and are being implemented. So you may hear it referred to as the next gen science standards, but in New York State, they adopted a different version. And the real difference is that New York State, in analyzing the standards, just saw some different content-based material that may have been missing in chemistry and physics, because in many cases, because we've had a Regents curriculum, we had separated chemistry and physics from many districts in other areas where they may have had more of a physical science approach. So our standards are only different, and they call them the New York State Science Learning Standards, not Next Gen, in that way. And if you ever look at the standards document, you would be able to differentiate it, because those standards that were added by New York State are highlighted in yellow. So I know it's a lot of information, but some people are interested depending upon where you are. I know there's some educators, future leaders in the audience, so it's always good to give some clarity from my perspective. So the new standards and the new shift is a focus with 3 dimensions, you'll hear. The 3 dimensions are content, which they call the disciplinary core ideas. The content is differentiated into 4 segments, but the 3 main segments that are very similar to the way we offer science now is you have earth and space science, then there's biology, and the physical science, which is differentiated into chemistry and physics, and then engineering and like sustainability focus. So that would be one of the dimensions. So if you kind of create a mental model of an intersecting Venn diagram with 3 circles, that would be the 3-dimensional approach. One of the circles would be the content. The other circle are the skills we talked about, which are so critical for students to understand how scientists and engineers do things, right? Engineers solve problems. Scientists answer questions. And there's a series of skills that they engage with to make that happen. So that is what is focused on, and that is how we sort of deliver the instruction and facilitate learning experience with students, is that the content is set up with a phenomenon. So it's like a big idea that gets students excited to learn, and then they start going through those skills that they're excited to find out more, and it's those skills that they use to do that. And then the cross-cutting concepts are the interlocking themes that are sort of consistent throughout and woven through all the different science courses or disciplines. So the way that we know it's working and this shift is that you should be hearing students talk about claims, evidence, and reasoning. So this is the framework where, like in social studies, they have historical thinking skills and they do DBQs, or you'll hear them talk about different things that they do, documents that they use to make sure that they base their answers on. This is the science parallel to that. So a claims, evidence, reasoning framework is, first they make a claim, which would be equivalent like to a hypothesis, right? And then they have to gather evidence through the series of science and engineering practices. And then they have to come up with a conclusion and justify it based on evidence. And we're trying to get students to not just, believe everything they hear and see. Dig deeper, find true evidence, vet the evidence to make sure that it's reliable and valid, and then base your claim on it. So here is our pathways, and this is available on the website through the course selection booklet, and this is obviously going to be available through video. But I crossed out, and there's strike-throughs in some of the wording, because that's the former standards terminology. We're shifting away from living environment, which is the biological sciences, and that's the framework of the, they call it the MST standards, not the next gen, and it's a lot, it's confusing, but that's being phased out. The middle school is in full-blown implementation of the new standards, and the first assessment is happening this year in May. It's computer-based, and it's testing the students' understanding of the new way. Next year is the first implementation of biology and earth and space science in the new framework. But the difference is that it will no longer be called living environment, but the terminology still exists in some cases in graduation requirements, because there is sort of this still evolution and shift going on. So I'm just trying to help people understand the difference. So in 6th grade, we currently teach physical science. 7th grade is our life science program, and 8th is earth and space, both for Science 8 students and also for the earth science students that are taking their regions. The difference is the Science 8 students that are currently in Science 8 will take the new standards 8th grade assessment on the computers. The students that are in 8th grade earth science are still being taught the physical setting, the old version, because the new regions in earth and space science hasn't been launched. That's next year.
There's no difference in the credit bearing. It's still the same high school Regents course that is a transfer credit on their transcript at the high school. And I like to think of students that are taking Earth and Space, whether it's Science 8 or Accelerated. I use the analogy, it's based on readiness. If someone told me, go out and run the New York Marathon, I would probably be in the hospital. Why? Because I don't have a readiness. But I'm not going to say anything negative about myself. It just means that I, for whatever reason, didn't focus on that, or I didn't deliberately practice the skills and development. So my readiness in that area hasn't been honed in on. If I do start focusing on that, I could develop a readiness, and depending upon my focus will, be directly related to the rate of change that I'm able to kind of get to an it would be an advanced place. Now, just like in math, there are plenty of segues for students to get to their destination if they have a mental model of where that is. Or we could also think about saying, there really is no sort of, finish line where there's a winner. It's not about that. It's about what is your path and your trajectory, and let's collaborate and work together with your family, with your teachers, with your counselors, with the chair people, and let's kind of come up with some possible pathways for you to get there. And most of the time, students get there, or some of the time, people have eureka moments saying, oh, I don't have to do summer classes for the next 3 years and give up my childhood. So I think the key thing is communication. And research does show that this Jeff Coven, if you've ever seen the Talent is Overrated research, where he has done studies, and there's YouTube clips, so you could look it up, and he has somebody just kind of, memorize without, being able to look at anything. It's just audible. Numbers. And what his whole theoretical framework is, and his conclusions that he's drawn, is that there are people that are born with predetermined talents that are genetically innate, but they can be surpassed by others that focus with deliberate practice to try to improve their skill development in certain areas. So what's the difference between deliberate practice and practice? Well, I know that in my golf game, I am much better of a driver than I am on the green. So deliberate practice would mean I know my deficiency is on the green, so I should be practicing that deliberately, not just keep on practicing what I'm good at. And that is how this particular theoretical framework shows that, we can help our students understand that if you really want something, you have to put in the energy and the efforts and develop those skill sets for deliberate practice to kind of get better at some of the things that you might not be better at, right? And the other thing is all this cultural kind of stuff that the kids are, so concerned about, which I get. It's real, It's, I want to be in this class because my friend's there, right? And that's hard. It's really hard. But getting them to truly understand readiness, and perhaps in the lower grades, so that they focus on trying to get those good habits that they need to, improve as learners. Anyhow, so in 7th grade, the students will take, if they are, going to be accelerated, there is a placement exam and some indicators that we look at that we call behaviors. And these behaviors are basically skills, and we've done a lot of kind of communication and studying together as a department to look at the science and engineering practices as skills that we look at, that we want to see if students, how they are at those, as well as some other dispositions that are more focused on, learning styles or executive functioning, because we know that those are things that are also important for students to excel or succeed in the accelerated track. So based on that, that's how we determine at the end of 7th grade who is ready to go into Earth and Space Science Regents, which is the high school version, or stay in Science 8. And students in Science 8 will then go on to take Earth Science the following year. Now you may be saying to yourself, Earth and Space Science in 2 years? That sounds redundant. Well, the beauty of the new science standards is that the way it's delivered is based on storylines. And a storyline is sort of a unit plan that has focus on what are anchoring phenomena. So if I could just say, oops, where's my, what's happening on April 8th? The eclipse, right? So here is sort of a, I don't know what you call this, like a meme or a cartoon, right? Where this is going to sort of be something that can inspire the students to say, what is an eclipse? Why does it happen? And what is this cartoon trying to kind of be funny and show us? That is kind of examples of phenomenon. The eclipse is a phenomenon. It's something that is going to allow us to celebrate curiosity and inspire the students to be curious about something. So there are so many different phenomena that are used in the various courses, but to differentiate between Science 8, Earth and Space, and Earth Science, Earth and Space Regents, we have different storylines focusing on different phenomena. Because Earth and Space, there's so much, right? And there's not going to be repetition. There's just going to be accumulated knowledge and skill development. So, after Earth Science is typically biology, and in New York State, students need 3 years of science to, one has to be a biology credit, and they have to only pass 1 Regents, but in Byram Hill, students take 5+ years of science on average. And sometimes that, well, it's always great, but when we look at our scores sometimes, in comparables, unlike math and ELA, sometimes in science, our chemistry scores are not the top of the state because we actually have more students that take chemistry than most schools in the state, because we have implemented different programs to encourage students to take chemistry. And when they do that, some of the students that take it are risk takers. They're taking it where in other schools they might go into a different class that's maybe a non-Regents chemistry, and they wouldn't take a Regents exam, which there's a bunch of different models, but that's an interesting thing just to keep in the back of your mind. So after chemistry, well actually after biology, the choice is theirs. There's like multiple forks and pathways students can take. They could go to Buffalo and to the Westchester, or they could go in so many ways. So what do I mean by that?
And the guidance counselors will help them in the high school.
Absolutely. And what do I mean by that? I mean that they could go from bio to chemistry to physics. They can go from bio to an STS elective. And if you want to know more about that, I would suggest going to our high school website, go to guidance, go to science. And in our course selection booklet, there's so much information that shows you all of the course options we offer. And obviously they can go into APs, they could double up on APs. I mean, the sky is the limit. And, well, here they are.
And we're going to have this information posted from this principal's coffee as well. So in case you can't see it now, or if we don't have to go through all of it, we'll have it up there as well.
And like Ms. Lappel said, there's the science teachers, like the math teachers, they do everything for the first 6 to 10 weeks the same, so that if there is the need to move, students can move up or down. So it's not a gatekeeping model. It's more of a assessment model, a screening model to make sure that the students are set up for success. So this is how we determine who is ready to accelerate. I mentioned that there's a test and the behavior points, and then the students average in math and science.
And there's also not a, that's our guide. If there's we would call them the cuspy, where there's like a gray area of students where that their scores are kind of in between. We're not going to claim that we know everything. We'll have a conversation with you over the summer if there's any children that are really, we just don't know the right placement, because at that point, again, it's about our students and making sure we afford them the opportunities and have a conversation with you.
And there are plenty of cases where students accelerate in science in 8th grade, and then they get to their junior year and they want to decelerate. So, I mean, and that's perfectly fine. You know, they want to go off into the arts, or, you know, they want to dig deeper in engineering, startup, you know, global scholars. So there's so many things to do that's the beauty of, you know, sort of the supportive model that we have. Oh, so these are the skills. Remember, the behavior points are based on. So the two that are highlighted are the two that are parallel with our science and engineering practices. And then the other 3 are more related to, you know, the dispositions or the other executive-like functioning skills.
Yeah, teachers will look at our students and say, okay, these are the things that they do well. Here's the areas that that we can't give them a point for, and that will give us insight in terms of if they don't get in, parents call and they'll say, well, here's where we think there might be areas for growth. And if they do get in, you know that they've done well in most of those. But we want to feel confident that they can manage a challenging course like earth science, and those are the skills that really are required.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, we were talking about one particular kind of prototype before about a student that might, you know, fixate on something. But then, you know, my son, for example, I'd pray that he fixates on things. You know, he's like all over the place. So, you know, all students are different, and because of that, these are skills, again, that if we help them understand that we will, you know, do whatever we can to help them, you know, want to improve on these things if they want to. You know, if I say anything to my son, I get the so he doesn't want it, and I had to come to grips with that. I just put these up here because, you know, ELA and math are typically the scores that are discussed all the time, and feel left out? No. I just thought that this was something that you may want to see, that our scores are phenomenal.
They were, yeah.
They're great. And, you know, we just have to pay mind to when we're analyzing it to make sure we recognize that, you know, sometimes the scores are reported in cohorts, but in science, they're not cohorts, right? And then I mentioned here before that, you know, here's where we are in the state. Biology is 1, earth science is 4. But again, that would be an example of why that information, the way the state looks at it, they're looking at the 8th graders and the 9th graders together, right? So some districts don't do it that way. And chemistry is number 6, and I don't have data to support my claim, but I am assuming that it's because we really have so many more students taking chemistry than most other districts, or other districts, they game it, right? So they'll, you know, get rid of a regents, or they'll let kids opt out. We don't do that here because we consider the regents, as of now, a really good data point for us. So.
Great. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So you made a statement that the students will be taking classes over summer. So for any student who will take advanced pathway will be taking classes every summer?
No, I'm sorry, I must have I must have not been clear. There are students that choose to do that as an optional pathway to just enrich or you know, just take classes because they're interested. That's not a requirement of ours.
But how common is it? Like how many students?
Oh, how many students? I would say I don't have
Are you talking
an
middle school or
absolute
high school?
statistic.
Either way, I mean, she's
Yeah.
from high school.
So, I mean, we've had middle school students that take summer programs like at the Johns Hopkins Institute and things like that. But I don't have an exact number. I mean, I suppose I could crunch, but I would probably say on average maybe 5 to 10 students may take summer courses.
I think it's important. It's just if your child loves science, then ask us and we will help to recommend some opportunities over the summer that would, again, make them happy.
So what typically happens is that a student may want to take as many AP courses as they possibly can, but they just can't take it in one school year or 2 school years, right? So I'll give you an example of what is happening right now. So we have a student that wants to take AP Physics C, right? And in order to take AP Physics C Mechanics, they are accelerated, and they want to, they need to have like an honors physics level class to do that. We believe that our physics course that we offer, that we've spent a lot of time developing, is the better option. So we recommend that they take Physics A as a junior, and then they could take Physics C as a senior, but they also want to take AP Biology and AP Chemistry. So in order for them to do that, our recommendation would be like, well, pick one, and then maybe you could think about, what they're doing is they're taking AP Biology either online or at another place over the summer, like, and we have a list of.
And you get that guidance from either Mrs. K or the guidance counselor.
Yeah, so that was my next question actually, because I was talking to, like, my son is still in middle school and that's my first child going through the system. So when I talk to people who have children in high school, so the way Byram's AP program is set up, that children cannot really take, there are, the way I talk to you about the clubs, like there are like 10 clubs happening on the day, one day, like, and then children cannot really choose the AP courses that they want because they are limited by many.
I think because they're singletons. So if you're going to have singletons in any high school schedule, then if you have a singleton up against a singleton, there's just a limit in terms of the capacity of your schedule in order to schedule singletons away from each other, because we haven't added to our AP in all of the subjects. So again, I think that's something that is designed through guidance.
Yeah, there's so many variables that go into building the schedule, like you know, where it falls, what teachers are available to teach it, because we just don't have an open, you know, stash of funding to fund certain things. But by and large, we try to help the students figure out how to do what they want to do by tailoring a personalized plan based on what they tell us they want to do. So we don't, at least it hasn't been brought to my attention, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that maybe people are talking about it and they just haven't brought it to our attention. But I haven't had a situation yet where there has been, you know, a student that didn't really get the outcome that they wanted in college, and that it was because they were prevented from doing something. Usually we're able to tailor something and find some outside support courses for them because they just want to do so much and there's so much to do.
But I think Christina Wilson's probably your best bet. Like, I think I understand what you're asking. I would tell you, I think Christina Wilson's your best bet to have that conversation with, because she has that 6-12 landscape and she'll be able to tell you about kind of specific instances.
Yeah, the biggest challenge in high school seems to be the number of slots you have compared to the number of courses that are offered, because there are over 20 AP courses. So if you're taking science research, it may be hard to take AP Bio and Chem at the same time. If you're not taking science research, then maybe you can, but that's like a choice that every student just sort of has to make.
That's a really good point. Plus there's mandates like gym, and gym is offered every other day. So then what we try to do is put gym on the sides of the lab. I mean, there's, like I said before, there's so many variables to consider that it's not really a linear equation. Is it quadratic? What would you say?
you have
Just
to
making a joke.
Yeah, I have one last question. So you showed the score. Like, I didn't understand why 2022 science score was so low as compared to all other scores.
Could it have been?
Maybe I missed the explanation.
I don't know. Maybe we could, 2022.
Yeah, go back.
Let's see.
Yeah, this one. Yeah. No, that, yeah, 82%.
Oh, well, I think what we should do is look at the state scores. That probably has to do with the fallout of the pandemic. I think that there was.
I'd have to look back at my records in terms of where we landed as a.
I think students were still sort of in like, how do I do school?
But I can look that up for you and get back to you. But I will tell you that this year again, our science, our scores that came out of the 8th grade were again top like 3% in the state. So yeah.
And this is just level 3-4. This is not their grades.
Yeah. Is there any other questions about the opportunities? Or? Sure.
So, both for algebra and art science in 8th grade, that's not considered advanced accelerated? Is it an A?
So,
it's not A.
So math. So I can do that. Math is the advanced.
So
And then
Like on
science
kids,
is
like it says
accelerated.
Algebra A, even if you take it in eighth.
Yes, so we recently changed for some of the later courses, it's the full word advanced in there. So the course will be listed as advanced. What you'll also see and what colleges will see on the transcript is it'll show off to the side what the what are considered the accelerated courses for that particular year. So for example, even a course like our Trig Algebra 2, which is part of our 3 and 2 pathway, even though it doesn't have the name advanced within the title, it still shows up on the right as a course that is accelerated, so that colleges can easily see that that's something that's like a beyond grade level course.
So on the grids, like you were showing, the pathway grids, the earth science and algebra don't have an A next to them, but they'll be noted as an example.
Algebra does,
Yep.
and then later on it has the full word advanced.
Earth science doesn't, I'm sorry.
Nope, go
Earth
ahead.
science doesn't because it culminates in the regions like algebra does, but algebra is one of the only regions that math students take, right?
Right, and for us,
Yeah, so-
I would say what we would consider an on-level algebra class in the high school is already above a Regents level. And if anyone was here with us the other night, was it Monday? I'll put our algebra scores against the state, but so in the state,
She's such a brilliant.
you know, our kids have done really well in that program. It's an extraordinarily strong program, and algebra is interesting because in a lot of schools, it's the deal breaker course. It's the thing that will decide whether a student's going to graduate. And I think we found a lot of success for our students there. But we do want to also have colleges recognize that things are above that Regents level there. So we do put the A there.
Right.
For algebra for eighth, but not for earth science.
Right, but I think.
It's accelerated.
But what I think I'm hearing you say is you're concerned that, that someone might overlook that it was an accelerated course in 8th grade if they're looking at transcripts. It's like Ms. Pellegrino said, it's notated. So it says, like, if a student took earth science in 8th grade, the A for biology and chemistry stands for advanced and accelerated.
Right.
If the student did not take earth science in 8th grade, it notates on the transcript that if they decide after that, like let's say for example, a student took science 8 and 8th grade, goes on to earth science in 9th grade, but then wants to go into bio A as a 10th grader, that A does not mean accelerated because they didn't accelerate, but it does mean advanced. So the A sort of has a multifaceted meaning, right? But it's notated on the transcript very clearly. And you bring up a good point that maybe getting maybe I'll work with Christina Wilson to kind of have a blocked out transcript so parents can actually see how it's notated, and maybe we could, help sense making. That's another thing in the 3 dimensions of science, is to help people make sense of things so they truly have that solid understanding.
Sure.
So that might help giving you a model, which is one of these science and engineering practices. See that?
And if they were to, and this is a hypothetical, so say they took the science in 8th grade, and then like you said, maybe they flip in 9th grade and say, no, I'd like to take, bio, but I don't want to take advanced. But
So
I'm
that's just
still
called-
technically accelerated. But there's no differential between that, right? You would just go into a regular bio Regents?
Well, they would go into a regular bio class, but there is a differentiation in that they're doing it as a 9th grader, and that would be notated.
As accelerated.
Well, it would be notated that they're taking it they're taking advanced. It wouldn't be advanced, but they know that if they're taking bio in 9th grade, that in our program, it's not a typical 9th grade.
Do we ever
trajectory.
do anything for incoming 9th grade parents about what a transcript looks like? Because
Good
I
question
can,
for Christina,
I
but I
think,
don't
do they?
believe
They
we
don't.
do.
And that would be a really good
But
idea.
I only, as a parent of a junior,
Yeah.
need to understand the school
Yeah.
profile, the
Yeah.
transcript, so all the questions that
Yep.
you're asking are things that I'm
Yeah.
just
Same
thinking.
thinking, right? Yeah, and just because neighboring districts, a lot of them do earth science more as the norm in 8th grade, right? And they may have a section that's not. Versus us, we're kind of like, well, we have more sections in math of earth science. But so as we're kind of going closer to the college scheme of things,
Yep.
and we're looking at comparative other schools,
Mhm.
even not nearby, it's saying, well, wait a second, we don't automatically do earth science in 8th grade. Is that a shift that other schools have made over time and we just haven't done it yet? Or is it,
So I've done some research in that, and I attend BOCES conferences with other science leaders, and there are districts that do physics first. So I think that
Or living environment, yeah.
colleges, first and foremost, they know districts. Like there's all types of algorithms and formulas and, you know, data analysis, that they kind of know our district and the types of students that come out, and they have a solid understanding for the most part of our programs. And I don't, at least I've been told, I'm hoping it's accurate, but I think it has to be, because of schools that do physics first, or there are school districts that don't offer earth science at all, but we value earth and space science as one of the most, you know, important sciences in everyday life, right? To answer your question, I don't think they compare our district to another district. They really look at our district knowing what our district students are, and they kind of know where they stand within similar students.
And I think that might be a great point. Like, you know, I didn't even know what a profile page was, right? And so we have a profile, and you look at it and you say, well, wait, there's so much more to our district than this one page that goes with the transcript. And, you know, how do they understand that? Because
But they do.
somehow they do.
They
Somehow
do.
you guys do
They
it, but
do.
we don't, you know, we don't see that.
They do it,
So,
but
yeah.
we don't all know how. And I think that's a Christina Wilson, maybe we could see. I know that there's another principal's coffee in May.
Yeah.
Let me float this and see.
I'm sure she can give you some information, and I'm also sure that some colleges are gonna keep that close to the vest, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're
Yeah.
gonna, what we're seeing, I think, more and more is the colleges are using AI, so they're probably gonna be a little bit silent about what's under the hood for AI, but they're using that to filter through applications. Initially, because there is such a large quantity of them. But it becomes kind of like the McDonald's secret sauce, you know?
You know, it's just a little leap of faith. Like,
There's
you know
also-
it's there, you know something's happening, but you don't know what it is.
Right.
And as a parent, your gut reaction
For sure.
is it adequate? Are you doing enough?
Absolutely.
And without knowing, you know, it kind of
Sure.
gets back to.
Okay.
So I have attended Christina Wilson's presentation, and I will say that my personal impression is that the colleges, and they do know there's a profile that they do access and look at, and that's been the message that has been reiterated for a few years, and this is my observation as a parent. So I feel like they do know our school district, and they do, the admission officers do take the time to understand who we are.
There's two other points. One is that the guidance department spends a lot of time with the universities and the admissions officers. They'll travel to them, and then they also have schools that come here. So in those conversations, they talk about the, you know, the course offerings and the selection. The other point, though, maybe the most important thing at the end of the day, is to look at the results. And if you can look actually historically, there's a system called Naviance when you get into high school. And you can go into the software package and you can look at the historical applicants to any college and the grade point averages and the standardized test scores anonymously that the students had that applied, who got in, who didn't get in. You really start to get a sense of college admissions landscape, but ultimately the results are just, you know, pretty outstanding from our high school. I think we rival anyone in the region. So that's the
So
true
that's the
test.
thing. It's there. I think some of us coming up like don't know it's there
Right.
until you've gone there, and it's
100%.
like, well, wait a second. So
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think you raise a really good point, and
Yeah.
we are a district that prides itself on continuous improvement. So
Right.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with sharing your lack of understanding with the desire to help make sense of it. And you're not alone. I have to imagine that there's so many of you, because that's typically what happens even in a classroom. Like, when we encourage our kids to let us know when they don't understand something, because there's many of the students that probably are in the same boat. So I think
Thank
that's
you.
great information.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll pass that along.
Yes.
So one quick question, we were talking about the science domain and the math domain, but not about the intersection, which is computer sciences. And all in all, I was expecting to see some type of, you know, separation and or.
I would love to talk to you about computer science. I was a computer engineering major, and I'm in charge of
Yeah, so
computer
am
science
I.
in high
So
school, so I would
it's
love to
very
answer
close to
any
my
and all
heart.
questions you have on it, because as I said to my folks Monday night, I'll hype engineering and hype computer science
And
from now
it's
till the time I
definitely
leave,
lacking. I've
so.
not seen any mention of it even, so not
So-
to, you know, discounting other sciences, of
So
course.
within the middle school, it falls under the realm of technology. I can tell you at the high school what you'll see. So freshman year, you have 2 courses that you can take. One is Intro to CS. That is a variety of different programming languages you'll be exposed to, as well as hardware. We also have a semester course called Pathways in Engineering. So for students that want to kind of dip their toe in, it's project-based. You get exposed to all the engineering before you realize that computer was the best one. And then from there, the Intro to CS class is the foundational course for our APCS class. That class is all Java all the time. That's not our choice, that's the College Board, so if you feel passionately about Java, we can talk afterwards. But that is kind of their language for that. And then we also have another class called APCS Principles that does not have a prerequisite to it, with the sole intention of getting folks to recognize how fundamental and important computer science is and trying to draw more people into at least some sort of experience with it, because we've had students that have had no programming experience go into that class, go on to be CS majors and CSTAs. So that class is language agnostic, meaning each district can select whatever language they would like to teach that course in. So for us, we start it in Scratch for a couple of weeks because the students do have the familiarity with it from technology in middle school, and then we make a quick switch to C.
Okay.
And then from there we go on to Python, and then from there we go on to JavaScript.
But is there nothing earlier, like starting around, you know, the
So
seventh?
I'm gonna
They do it in
have,
middle school for sure,
so
yeah.
here's, I would love to talk more about this, because we're almost at half an hour. No, so this was really, the reason why you're not hearing about the technology and the computer science is because this really was about the math and science pathways. So we do have a lot to talk about. If you want to hang out, stay for a couple minutes, we could share some more. Because we do have we're very proud of our technology program 6 through 8. But for now, if anyone else wants to stay, they can hear a little bit more about it. I could also bring something, always to be helpful, maybe at the next principal's coffee as well. But because we're so over, and I'm so happy that you guys wanted to talk, so thank you.
One thing just to make you feel a little better, just like with guidance, I will bring that concern to also our technology person, because what I'm hearing you say is maybe having technology present with us so that we present like sort of.
Well, yeah, only thing is this is a math and science. This is really about the pathways and the opportunities to accelerate, so yeah, for sure. Okay.
I'll chat anytime.
Thank you everyone so much for coming today.